You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your Amac podcast, Better for America. Today, we have the fun of returning to the Reb and Rob show, and I'm thrilled to have with me Bobby Charles. We'll be talking about some leading issues that seem to be reoccurring, and we'll talk about what lies ahead also. I'm so thrilled to have Bobby with us. Just a refresher for those who don't know Bobby's background. Bobby is a young old timer, I like to call him. He has lived several lives already, having served in the Reagan White House, the Bush 41 White House. He ran a major part of the House Oversight Committee for 5 years under Newt Gingrich and was a New York and D.C. litigator. He served as Assistant Secretary of State under George W. and Colin Powell. And Bobby has written 2 books and is a prolific contributor to the Public Dialogue, a tried and true Reagan conservative. Bobby, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Rebecca. We'll kick off a good 2022 here.
That is great. I've missed you. I've missed our time together like this. And Bobby, we could go in a million different directions really today. But I do want to talk about one of the articles that appeared on our website. And I want to remind people that are listening of the amazing work that we have published on our website and also on our news app. As you know, Bobby, in 2021, we invested heavily in our news and opinion analysis division. And we did that, Bobby, because AMAC members wanted more of the news and they weren't getting this information. We knew that Washington, D.C. media was ignoring all of the big stories, essentially hiding a lot of the important news and just staying away from it entirely. And one of the issues I want to talk about, we're not going to hear a lot on mainstream. They like to stay away from this particular topic. An article that you did write that will be posted at amac.us this week. It was dedicated to Title IX and women's sports. Now, I want to remind people who are listening that Title IX says essentially that no person in the United States on the basis of sex should be excluded from participation or be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity that receives federal financial assistance. So, Bobby, help us to understand both how the progressives are undermining the gains that girls and women made under Title IX, and then what really the larger picture looks like. Are the progressives in this way, through their concentration of power, through CRT and other issues that we're seeing, undermining America and more the Democratic Party as a national force?
Yes, what a great example. So the reason I picked that, and I think it's great that we talk about it, is that Title IX in many ways is a microcosm of what's going on across the United States. What's happening is that logic and hard-fought victories, which the American people all believed in, and by the way, Title IX, this is the 50th anniversary of Title IX this year. It was signed into law by Republican Richard Nixon. It is an example in many ways of how the progressives are taking logic and straightforward moral approaches, and they're turning them upside down. So what do I mean on that? Title IX, which was came into being about 50 years ago, moved girls' sports, and anyone who's a parent or was in girls' sports moved it from 30,000 participants to 300,000 participants. They added some 4,600 women's girls' sports teams. And why did they do this, Rebecca? Because historically, and I have a daughter and I have sisters. Historically, what happened is that women were not given the same run. You know, a football program had lots of money, but women didn't really have anything to speak of. And that also went with the academic side. There was, in 72, there were, I think, 7% of women got a law degree, or 7% of all law degrees were women and 9% of all medical degrees. So what did this do? Today, there's parity between men and women in medical and law degrees. Yes, men's sports dropped about 2,700 teams, but they added about 3,700 teams, and women got 4,600 teams, and maybe over that same time have dropped about 2,000. So the gains for women have been higher. But where's the outcome? The outcome is in all those things that come from parity, the understanding that you're supposed to be physically healthy. In the Olympics in 2016, women pulled down 61 medals. That's 3 times the amount of medals they pulled down in 72. And so now what are the progressives doing? The progressives are saying, and you can go online and you can see it, forgive my saying so, but a man who declares himself a woman will now be able to compete against all the women in high school and in college. And what is that doing? There was a recent case up in Pennsylvania. It's wiping out all of the women's records. It's wiping out why? Because a man's structure physically, whatever hormones you give him, is going to put him in an advantageous position. So what they're doing is they're taking biology, basic law, basic math, and they're turning it on its head and saying, no, we need to politicize this for our constituency, undermine traditional values, in this case, undermine a tremendously hard-fought victory for women. I cannot imagine. My daughter was a cross-country runner. I cannot imagine if the boys who also had better times necessarily because of their physique were put up against all of her teammates. They wouldn't have had a chance to do all the good things they did. So, they're taking us backwards. They call themselves progressives. They're really regressives.
Yeah, and we've got to be reminded there are two sexes, male and female. Each one of us here, every human being is born either male or female. And so to act as if that is not true, is not following the science. I mean, isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy? Yeah, you have to laugh in a sense. It is a very sad and real situation because we understand that this certainly is undermining women's sports. And again, mainstream media does not want to talk about these things. They know that the majority of Americans do not agree that you ought to just let anybody play in female sports, women's sports, because they feel like a woman that day. It's completely backwards, Bobby. Thank you. And this really leads me to a wider topic. And again, you've written about this recently, and I think it's one that we should be thinking about. And that is the way in which the Biden White House seems to be selling fear. Now, you and I have had some offline conversations about this. And, I do love speaking with you because you've been through so much. You've lived a lot of years. You've been exposed to a lot of things. You've seen much, especially working in the White House. This is the first time I've seen a president really try to sell fear. Seems to go against the grain of who we are as Americans. And the message seems to be that we should be fearful and that we should be more dependent on government and that we should be worried about our future. And then we heard this week, Bobby, from the president who seems to foresee a winter of death, right? A winter of death of Omicron. And again, more broadly, seems to be peddling fear. So, my question to you, Bobby, is this the right answer right now? Or should we be looking toward the new year with hope and with optimism, with courage? I know my answer. What is your take?
Yes, you really put your finger on something very fundamental, Rebecca, and you're absolutely right. This White House seems to think that if you can put people in enough fear, they will accept dependence, and they will question themselves, and they will question their values, and they will sort of fold over in the progressive direction. But we all know you grew up in a wonderful family. Your father, founded Amac, and has your whole family is hardworking and dedicated to the proposition that when we face adversity, we don't fold and run, as we incidentally did in Afghanistan. We don't fold and run. We turn into the wind and we tack upwind, and that's the way it works. And so, as Winston Churchill said, something like, the defeat is not defeat is not final. Defeat is not fatal. Victory is not final. It is the courage to continue that counts. And the bottom line is we're in a position right now where each of us individually and as a nation need to remember who we are. And a couple of the pieces that we've recently talked about and have been out there reinforce the idea that we are always at our best when we rally. We're never at our best when we fear and run. And even just in the last several days, the president comes out and touts, Omicron as if it is the Black Plague. Okay, it is not the Black Plague. It is a variant on a virus that has done a lot of damage, but and people have made their choices, balancing their equities, what they're going to do. But we have to have the courage to go forward, because when you don't, and 2022, we have so much to look forward to, and there's so much that's going right, whether it's the markets or our own internal understanding of what's right and wrong. If we allow the boat to drift, you drift backwards. And I believe that every American in their heart of hearts knows that fear is never the answer and courage is always the answer.
Thank you, Bobby. One thing that I feel encouraged to share with anybody who might find this uplifting is the way in which I have been able to work through situations of fear. Fear, it doesn't mean when we choose courage, it doesn't mean that fear doesn't exist. It's there. Oftentimes, in many different ways, it'll show up in your life. But we make a decision, and I make a decision. I make a personal decision every morning to wake up and to face whatever it is that's coming my way. And one thing that I do each and every day on my drive into work is I listen to Christian music. It's what I enjoy doing, and it's sort of a way of praying for me, if you will. Um, and everybody has their own, I guess, their own way of getting it in a quiet place. Some people, might like to go to church. Other people might like to close their bedroom door and have a few minutes of quiet time. I like music. That to me really uplifts me. This morning on my way into work, I did not listen. I was in another car, in a rental car, and the station that I typically listen to, I couldn't find. And I have a relatively short ride into the office. I couldn't listen to it, and I recognized this morning I'm off a little bit. I'm not as optimistic. I'm not as I'm worried a little bit. And I noticed, what did I do differently today? Why am I feeling this way? And I'm telling you, Bobby, prayer for me personally, and I know for so many people listening, is so powerful, especially in the face of fear. Because when we remind ourselves how merciful and how wonderful God is, how important it is for us to remember that we are each wonderfully made with incredible purpose and an incredible calling. And when you recognize that, you're reminded each day that day in and day out is not always going to be easy. Life is very difficult. We all know that life is hard. But when you can go back to believing and understanding and just knowing that there's a bigger it's not about the moments of fear. There's a bigger calling. There's something greater, I think, that we can all strive to achieve. And part of that is the way that we treat other people. Part of it is the way that we communicate, the words that we use. Are we uplifting other people or are we putting other people down? Uh, I think that what we see coming out of the White House, Joe Biden is dividing people, calling those who are unvaccinated sort of stupid people that deserve to get the virus. Now, he doesn't use those exact words, but that's what we hear. That's what a lot of people are hearing. A division dividing people, the White House dividing people based on whether or not you've got the shot or not. And again, here at AMAC, we're all about talk to your doctor, talk to make sure that the decision is right between you and your doctor. But ultimately, this is America. We love our freedoms. We love the ideas that we encourage people and we don't force people. It's not a one size fits all. And it is an emergency vaccine. So I think for the White House to use these fear tactics and using Omicron as sort of a divider to further divide people is such a bad thing for our nation. And so I want to encourage people, do what you know is right, but really get with God because God is in control at the end of the day, and God is overseeing all things. And I'm a better person for knowing that and for going to God in difficult times. I just thought I'd share that because I think a lot of people here can agree. And Bobby, the thing that I love about our conversations too, and you do this regularly, is you love to highlight lives that have made a difference. And so we recently lost Colin Powell. He was a tremendous man, and others. And people haven't really heard a whole lot, I don't think, about Colin Powell. Perhaps if you could tell us a few stories. You did work with the man, maybe about his kindness, his leadership, his courage, and tie that. The stories that you've shared with me, Bobby, Colin Powell's stories of courage, and he was a brave man. And I know that he encountered many difficult situations, fearful situations. What can you share with us?
So a wonderful background, and very happy to tell you some stories. Closely having worked with him for a couple of years, every single day. Let me also say, you point out something really wonderful in a way. Everyone faces fear. I have good friends who are fighter pilots, and I have good friends who are former astronauts, And it's not that they are not fearful. It is that they recognize that when you dip into that reservoir of faith and you dip into that reservoir of inner strength, you will find the courage to put that fear aside. And once you've done that, you're suddenly stronger, and it grows out further. By the way, Colin Powell, despite a lot of conservatives said he abandoned the conservative cause because he went over and voted for Obama. I don't remember if he voted for Biden, but of course he'd known Biden for 4 decades. I mean, and the bottom line on all this is the man himself was an extraordinary leader, especially in the areas that I interacted with him in. I was 10 years a naval intelligence officer, and I remember his picture on the wall in the Pentagon, in fact, in the spaces in the Pentagon that were destroyed later. And I also remember him vividly as a personal leader, close. So what distinguished him? You put your finger on a couple of key things that make good leaders. I would say he cared very deeply about his people. And I have a piece up this week about sort of the contrast and how Biden really doesn't seem to care for his people at all. And so what's happening is they're all fleeing the White House. I mean, it's like a hemorrhaging right now, which is really rather remarkable. It's like they see a sinking ship. But Powell was the exact reverse. You wanted to be in the meeting with him every day, and you knew that he knew everything about you and your family. He knew what your stresses were. He was interested and concerned. So I'll tell you a couple of little stories. One is, and I've told these periodically now and again, but one was that at the time our daughter was very small, and one day after I'd been there maybe a year, and she couldn't have been more than maybe 4 years old, she says all of a sudden, as we're headed to an apple orchard, I want to pick apples for Colin Powell. And of course, kids come out with crazy stuff. And we said, okay, well. And then, of course, my wife said she won't remember that when she wakes up. Sure enough, she did remember it as soon as we got there. So we gave her a bag, picked the apples. Next day, brought them into the secretary, kind of said, doing the dad thing here and making sure you have these apples my daughter picked for you. He was very gracious, but that night, and it happened to be a late night, we were working Afghanistan and Iraq, and he was Secretary of State. One of his key people comes in through my door frame at about 10 o'clock at night and just said, I've got this little envelope for you here from the secretary. And sure enough, it had a big name, my daughter's name on it, and then opened it up with her that weekend, and in big handwriting so the child could see it, kind of understand the words, said, thank you so much for those apples, by name, her, and then thank you so much for those apples. I really love apples, your friend, Colin Powell. And if he did that once, as I like to say, he did it 10,000 times. Another thing that illustrates whether you care about people, and this really is the cornerstone of good leadership, because if you will be attentive to your people, they will be attentive to you and the mission. And that is critical. And it's critical in combat. It's critical in the civilian world. If you really care about your people, they will understand that, and they will give back everything that you have given to them. It's not the reason to do it, but it is an outcome that results. So one day, in the department, we have hundreds of people, actually thousands, all over the city. And a woman comes to my office, and she looks very bemused. And I said, "What is it?" She said, 2 years ago, Colin Powell walked all these hallways all over the city that had State Department people in them, thousands of people. And he shook hands and he asked us, tell me about what you're working on. Tell me about your family. And it took him days when he had first gotten there. And he just walked every hallway, and just people poured out of their offices. Everybody wanted to meet the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And he was special and, already pretty remarkable, great leader. And she said, I hadn't seen him in 2 years. And he stopped me in the hallway by name and asked about each of my kids by name.
Wow. That's a
Now
guy
that's a leader.
who really remembers, and you don't remember things unless they're important. So he made people important, and
Absolutely.
that is really wonderful to hear. Thank you, Bobby, for sharing that. I do want to shift and talk a little bit about. I want to hear some of your predictions. Boy, 2022 weren't we all relieved to say goodbye to 2021? We don't like being a year older, but the last 2 years have been tough on so many of us, and on the economy, on small business, and on parents, and everyone has been affected. And Now we see here in 2022 that there will likely be great focus on the midterm elections. And we're hearing a lot about this Build Back Better bill. And folks that are listening know that Joe Manchin essentially was the Democrat that said this is out of control. This is too much spending. This does not make sense. So thank goodness we had a Democrat that was not as extreme as so many of them seem to be these days. Tell us about your predictions in the future. Is Build Back Better, that mega spending bill, really dead, or will we see it resurface? And how worried should we really be about inflation? I think inflation is on everyone's. Go ahead, Bobby.
No, you're absolutely right, Rebecca. Those are two very big issues. I'd like to think that 2022 is the year of resilience, or the year of America sort of waking up and realizing who we really are. And there's an awful lot of optimism in that. The Build Back Better plan, I think, is dead. I think what's happened is people realized. I read that bill. It is just it's a heap of power centralization, and it literally comes down to literally regulating how you ride your bicycle. It is a ridiculous bill. And yeah, it's got things in it that people can tout here and there. I'll give you some shoelaces, and you want some, shoe shine polish. But the bottom line is, it's a bunch of it. It's really a socialist. It's a tract. It's a socialist tract. And I think what's happened is, by virtue of Amac and others speaking out about what socialism really is and how it creeps on a society, and how devastating it is to a society and the freedoms of the individual, and the equality between individuals. Instead of pulling people up, it pulls everybody down. Bottom line is that bill isn't going to go anywhere, but they will try other tricks. They will try to pressure both Manchin and Sinema to give up the filibuster. They will try to push voting regulation, I'll call it, at the federal level, which will try to undermine the voting integrity laws that the states have passed. There are certainly threats out there, but the other good part of this is that there is already, you can see a turning of the tide. There is an under the water, under the surface consensus that is growing. People are saying, I don't want this CRT business. Get out of my school board. Get out of my school. They don't want inflation that runs away because you have runaway federal spending and you've destroyed energy independence. They don't want to see our border wide open and crime going through the roof in every major city. They do not want to see us run away from China and Russia the way we ran away from Afghanistan. They realize people are really awakening. And so there institutionally, there's some really fascinating things happening. We all know that in November of 2022, America can take back this country. And we can do that by flipping one or both of the chambers of Congress. And then they can't pass crazy stuff. Okay. So that's a great step forward. We also know that more and more of the voices, yours, everybody's out there who understands common sense, are beginning to percolate up at the local level, at the national level. AMAC does a lot of that. But Americans are truly waking up. We also have big decisions coming out of the Supreme Court. We may see a reversal of Roe v. Wade this year. That is a very significant move. We may see an expansion finally, or a reintroduction of Second Amendment rights. Those cases are on the docket. And so you have at least a 5-4, maybe a 6-3 court that will come in behind some of the core values that have been eroded and in many ways stolen by the progressives. So what I see is 2022 is the year when we get up off the ground, dust ourselves off, and say, you will not take this country away from us. This country is ours, fought for, defended to this time, to be defended into the future, and we will not allow these values to go away. And that's why 2022 is going to be different. It really doesn't matter. People, even in Omicron, Rebecca, the markets are shrugging off Omicron because they're saying, enough. We need to get back to work. And that's who we are. We Americans. We take it on the chin for a while, and then we strike back.
Yeah. And isn't it something really how the culture war is really impacting the left? It's hurting the Democratic Party. Uh, in other words, these things we spoke about Title IX as an example, but we're talking about CRT. We're talking about other issues that the left over and over either denies, fights for in the name
Mm-hmm.
of equity, which makes very little sense. That we should have men playing in women's sports, or that we should be teaching children that America is inherently racist. These are bad
Well, and of
things.
course,
And I think the American people are actually, those are the issues that are really hitting home. And people are saying, wait a minute, don't teach this stuff to my kid.
yeah.
This is not what we believe. This is not what we know to be true.
Mhm.
And so the crazier it seems that the left gets, the more that mainstream America is waking up. So I do pray that 2022 uh, offers tremendous change, and I hope that we do take back the House and the Senate. I do see a big red wave coming. Whether or not it's big enough to change things in both chambers, we'll have to wait and see.
You know,
It'll be interesting to see who runs in 24. I don't think it'll be Biden. It's still a little early. We'll have fun talking about what candidates they actually put up, but I don't see any promising candidates either for 2024. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that.
I just want to pick up on something you said, Rebecca, because of course, what's happened is there's an intention of dividing us. And that divide and conquer is an old strategy. And the idea is to turn Americans against each other. So we'll teach racism in the schools and we'll pretend that there are 64 flavors of gender and we'll do all these things that divide us, right? Well, the irony is that, I wrote a piece about this on the Amac site recently. Stop, everybody talks about the tribes, right? I'll be of this tribe and you're of that tribe. And now, if you really think about it for a minute, and this is what's happening, it's waking up. People are waking up to this across the country. We are the liberty tribe, we Americans. We are the liberty tribe collectively. There's no country in the world like us. There's no country more generous. There's no country that offers more opportunity. There's no country more, however you measure prosperity, there's no country like us in the world. And that's because we do, at the end of the day, when we realize, when we think about who are we are the Bill of Rights. We are the tribe that believes in, defends, and actually pushes liberty all over the world. And there is no other country like us. So I think part of this is just kind of taking the sleep out of our eyes and saying, yeah, there's a very bright future, and we define it. There's nothing written about the future. If we take our cues from the past, we will understand what's at risk, and we're going to make great things happen this year.
Thank you, Bobby. Bobby, I've got one last question for you today, and this really draws on your life experiences. Your experiences have put you in a number of unusual places, and your stories are often very instructive. Now, you wrote a piece recently about a discovery that you made in Laos. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are
That's
correct. Yes.
Thank
Yep.
you. That's Laos, Laos, and that is seemingly a forgotten part of the world. And it reaffirms really how good we as Americans are and how we strive to be so good and the amazing impact that we have in places that no one has even heard of or can pronounce. And we are such a beacon to the wider world. So, could you briefly, in closing, tell us this story? It was a story of great hope in a time
Yes.
when we seem to really need to remember who we are.
Yes. So I'm reminded, Rebecca, as I tell this story, of an old story of a philosopher who was walking across a desert, and and he was questioning in his mind the existence of God, and he stumbled on he's the equivalent of, he said, I stumbled on a stopwatch. And what he was real, and he opened it up, and it's got all this design in it that's extraordinary, and he realized there has to be a creator. The point being that we see things sometimes some little nugget, some little thing, the veins in a leaf, the fact that every single snowflake is different, something that strikes us, and it awakens in us, not a political realization, but almost a maybe in some cases political, but a spiritual realization. We realize, wow, there is a greaterness that we hadn't figured out until now. So what happened in that particular case, and it seems sort of, I guess, pedestrian in a way, but I was an assistant secretary of state for Colin Powell, and my job was the operational guy. I was going around the world, and we had about programs in about 70 countries, and they were all the what I'll call the anti-vacation spots. We had programs in Iraq and Afghanistan and Colombia and Kosovo, and I was always looking operationally for what are we getting for the taxpayers' dollars. I was not a political hack. My idea was I'm only here for a limited period of time. A lot of money that comes out of people's back pockets that they work real hard for is getting spent around the world. What's it being spent on? And I realized in this particular trip, no one had gone to this country, Laos, in years and years and years and years. And I thought, we're giving them money for something. It looks like counter narcotics. on paper. I want to go find out. And I did this all. I mean, I was a former investigator. I did this all over the world. I decided I'm just going to go find out. So I fly into Vientiane, and the U.S. ambassador there meets me, and I had some pretty hard-nosed conversations. It's interesting. This isn't even in the article, but I had some very hard-nosed conversations with the leadership of that country. And although I was there to find out what they were doing on counter narcotics, they also had some Christians who were imprisoned, and I sort of hit him pretty strongly about them being released. The ambassador said, "Boy, nobody's ever said that to him before." I said, "Well, I'm here, so I'm going to say it, and I'm going to tell him that there's a certain quid pro quo here. You can't destroy liberties that we believe are important and ask us for money." So he finally says at the end of the day, "Let's get in a helicopter and go north." Well, the first thing, Laos, of course, is very near Vietnam, Cambodia. They were all part of the Vietnam War. It's a giant jungle area where you find almost nothing. And by the way, in the Vietnam War, what happened was that the Hmong minority actually helped American fighter pilots when they went down, and they were liberty-loving kind of population at that time within that country. So when it went communist, and the Laotians or the Lao took over, they ran all of the Hmong out, and they ran them up, kind of like what you're seeing in Afghanistan, I guess. They ran them up into the mountains, and they couldn't. So I just couldn't really understand what the ambassador was going to show me that was going to be so significant. But I said, "Well, I'm here. Go ahead, show me." So we flew 2.5 hours, I think, or it was a very long flight north, and we finally get in a rickety old helicopter. We land in a nowhere place, and just to understand that the animosity between the Lao and the Hmong was very, very strong. I mean, at the point of, I can't think of a good cultural equation, but these people do not get along in most of the country. So or didn't. And so he takes me to this village, and it's an amazing little village. It's like a little pocket of what you would say might be rural America. It's got just enough of what it needs to, livestock. It's got a drug treatment program so that people are getting away from that. It's got all these great productive things going on. And then it washed over me. The village is completely integrated, Hmong and Lao. And so he said to me, "You see, this is America. We make this happen all over the world. We are not just a country, Rebecca. We are an idea. America is the idea of free speech, free worship, freedom from persecution. And that is why we have to wake up and realize that we not only have a right, but we have an obligation to the future to keep that idea alive." So that was that wonderful experience.
Oh, Bobby, thank you so much. I really enjoy hearing it, and it does and should sit with all of us, leave us all with that sense of hope and optimism. I think people at our very core, uh, you know, lean towards good, want to do good, want to do better. And, I'm so proud of our AMAC members, so many whom volunteer. We've got hundreds of volunteers on the grassroots level that are getting together with their local communities, an extension of AMAC, and really bringing those issues back to AMAC so that we can bring their voice to Washington, D.C. I am so excited for 2022. I can't even begin to tell you. And I do pray that the virus is a thing of the past in the coming months, hopefully with warmer weather in the spring and the summer. I'm an optimist. I like to think this way. I like to be positive, and here at AMAC, all of us are just so positive. So thank you for leaving us with a very positive story. Thank you, Bobby.
You bet. That's always my pleasure.
Excellent. And to everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in today. May 2022 be a year of hope and courage, not fear. And from all of us, may your holidays, your new year remind us all that we have so many blessings, that we are always lifted by recalling those great memories. Thank you for your perspective, Bobby, your insights, your unwavering hope in the future as AMAC members look with renewed hope towards a great 2022. And thanks for listening and checking in today. And folks, if you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, you can go ahead and do that and watch. You can listen to today's podcast plus track breaking news right there on your smartphone. So go ahead and download the AMAC News app. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, folks, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is Bobby Charles. This is the Reb and Rob Show. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.